Greetings and welcome to today's program entitled Bed Bugs in Schools. This webinar is produced by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency's Center of Expertise for School Integrated Pest Management. First, we'd like to thank you all for attending and thank our knowledgeable presenters for their participation. This is Brad Miller with the Center of Expertise for School IPM. I have the pleasure of moderating today's program. This webinar is part of a series of educational presentations intended to improve information to people like you who work in schools and school-related positions. Our webinars focus on the importance of integrated pest management, or IPM, to students, staff health, and the role you play in implementing an effective IPM program in schools. Every school has a pest that walks, flies, or hitchhikes in at one time or another. Today's webinar will discuss the challenges of dealing with bedbug introduction and developing a proactive IPM strategy. We will review the control tactics that are consistent with the Integrated Pest Management program. Our aim is to better prepare you to keep bedbugs out of your schools. I would like to introduce our presenters for this webinar today. First, Dr. Marcia Anderson. Dr. Anderson is with the EPA Center of Expertise for School IPM. She holds a PhD in Environmental Management from Montclair State University, a Master's in Teaching Curriculum from King University, a BS degree in Landscape Architecture and Biology. Prior to joining the center, she was a bedbug coordinator for the EPA's Region 2, where she developed bedbug educational materials and participated in outreach events. Our second presenter, Dr. Stephen Kells, is the Associate Professor for Extension Entomologist at University of Minnesota. He has a BS and MS from the University of Guelph and a PhD in entomology from Purdue University. Dr. Kells is known for his many bedbug and other pest-related publications, videos, and learning modules. His basic and applied research supports both the urban and industrial stored product sectors. Dr. Kells' research focuses on the behavioral ecology of bedbugs and stored product pests, including mold mites, leading to sustainable IPM solutions. Our third and last panelist, Mr. Stephen Merlino, is the Executive Director of Facilities Management for the Paterson, New Jersey Public Schools, the third largest school district in New Jersey, where he oversees 54 schools. He is a New Jersey licensed exterminator with school IPM designation. He is a lead accredited professional with a degree in HVAC mechanical systems design. He previously managed 82 schools in the Newark Public Schools as the Executive Director for Facilities for 15 years. Under Mr. Merlino's leadership, the Newark Public Schools received numerous environmental awards, including the ASBO Facilities Masters Award, EPA Tools for School National Excellence Award, EPA National Mentorship Award, and Green Cleaning Award. Mr. Merlino was also the Bureau Manager for New York City Board of Education, in charge of 400 schools in the Brooklyn and Staten Island. Dr. Anderson, if you'd please like to take it away with our first presentation.
Thank you very much. Well, bedbugs really do go to school. Bedbugs that hitch a ride into the school in one student's backpack could be carried home by another student, making the school a potential hub for bedbug spread. More commonly, a few bedbugs will hitchhike to school from an infested home by hiding in a student's clothing or backpack. Here are just a few of the responses that some schools have taken when somebody has reported a bedbug. Few things cause such strong emotional reaction as does the suspicion or discovery of bedbugs. Bedbugs elicit fear and loathing along with a strong dose of stigma, even though hygiene, sanitation, or dirt have nothing to do with bedbug infestations. When bedbugs arrive in school, accusations fly with demands for immediate action, even if ineffective or inappropriate. Don't let this happen in your school. The good news is that there are few established breeding populations in schools, except boarding schools. Unlike apartment buildings, homes, and hotels, schools are not as likely to develop breeding populations of bedbugs because the bugs feed exclusively on blood taken from persons at sleep or at rest. However, bedbugs are still a growing problem, cited in more and more schools across the country. Typically, one or a few bedbugs hitchhike into the school on clothing, book bags, and other possessions, and then wander looking for a host or hiding place. There is no need to close the school, and no need to send students home. Avoid stigmatizing students who you suspect have brought bedbugs into school from home. Do not allow untrained staff to apply pesticides to control the bedbugs, and widespread pesticide applications are absolutely not necessary. The formula for success in dealing with bedbugs is to prepare for the inevitable and educate everyone. A 5-step approach for success in bedbug management includes developing a written bedbug action plan in advance of problems. The most important step in bedbug management is to remain calm. And then develop a district-level policies and procedures. And then develop specific procedures and staff responsibilities for responding to bedbug incidents. Anticipate bedbugs' appearance and prepare your response in advance. And lastly, engage all stakeholders and get everyone, students, parents, faculty, and staff, accustomed to dealing with bedbug introductions. We'll be discussing more about bedbug action plans throughout today's presentation. The key to avoiding panic is to educate everyone. Engage the entire school community. Educate administration, other maintenance and facility staff, nurses, teachers, students, and especially parents about the basic bedbug biology and habits. How to recognize bedbugs and their evidence. All employees need to know what bedbugs look like, all the life stages, so that they can recognize a bedbug when they see one. Why everyone? Well, employees are located all over the school, as are the students, and if all eyes are looking out for bedbugs, there's a greater chance that they'll be discovered quickly. Keep in mind that students are not the only people capable of bringing bedbugs to school. Employees can as well. Know the policies and procedures for bedbug discoveries. Let everyone know that the school is being proactive and not reactive. Everyone should know who to contact in your school with questions, and early reporting is essential. Now I want you to take a look at the screen. The first step to know is what bedbugs look like. Many small arthropods are easily mistaken for bedbugs. Get a positive ID first. Take a look at the pests on the screen and select which one or ones you think may be bedbugs. Proper identification can save time, anxiety, and money, and the only way to confirm a bedbug is to find live bedbugs, collect a few, and have a professional identify them. Number 3 is a bedbug nymph, and number 6 is an adult bedbug. The adult bedbug is mahogany color. It's about the size of an apple seed and wingless. They do not fly or jump, but they use their 6 legs to scurry very quickly across surfaces. There are 5 juvenile stages called nymphs. The dark color in the abdomen is the blood remaining after feeding. They shed their skins after each molt. And finally are the tiny 1 to 2 millimeter eggs that are often glued to rough surfaces. You can't see bed bugs with the naked eye. Well, that's a myth, okay? This is clearly not true. Adult bed bugs are easily spotted as they are 5 to 7 millimeters in size and reddish-brown in color. The myth started when people got confused between bed bugs and dust mites. They are different species and are handled in completely different ways. What works for dust mites will not necessarily remove bed bugs. Spotting a bed bug may sometimes depend if you're wearing glasses. How do bed bugs feed? Well, they penetrate the skin and inject an anticoagulant saliva to the wound, which causes varying degrees of inflammation. Bed bugs feed on host blood for 3 to 10 minutes and then scurry away. They'll feed every few days if a host is available, approximately every 4 or 5 days. And they often void part of their previous meal while feeding, leaving dots of telltale excrement. Bed bugs aggregate in various cracks and crevices during the day. They're active at night, but will acclimate to activity during the day, depending upon the schedule of their food source. An increased concentration of carbon dioxide in a room as you exhale stimulates them to begin searching for their next meal. They easily travel 20 feet each way to feed. They're fast crawlers and scurry quickly back to their hiding places after a meal. Here are some of the signs of bed bugs. You can see dark, rusty droppings and shed skins, blood stains, eggs and casings among droppings or in crevices. And yes, there is an offensive, sweet, musty odor if there's a large concentration of bed bugs. And also, you can spot live bed bugs. As I said before, they do scurry very quickly. Another common bed bug myth is that bed bugs are active only at night. While bed bugs prefer darkness, they'll come out at night and any time that they haven't eaten for a few weeks and are really hungry. So keeping the light on at night won't deter them from biting. In offices, classrooms, break rooms, they can hide in plush couches and chairs and easily survive by getting their blood meal during the day. There's a myth that bed bugs often show up in sets of 3 in a row, like breakfast, lunch, and dinner, but this is clearly untrue. Bed bugs will come out of hiding to feed when they're hungry, usually once a week, and they feed until they're full and then return to their hiding spots, leaving blood spots or bed bug poop along their route. The bites in a row happen if they happen to be feeding along the sheet and human intersection, like pigs at a trough, or if one is disturbed mid-meal and has to reinsert its mouth part. Professionals cannot definitively identify bed bug infestations by the bites alone. Because people's reaction to bed bug bites vary from no reaction to large welts, there's no way to positively identify if a bite was caused by bed bugs. However, bites can initiate inquiries and educational opportunities. Was a student outside during mosquito activity? Or are there pets in the home? Are others in the home being bitten? There are no documented cases that indicate bed bugs pass disease from one host to another. And the salivary proteins do cause sensitivity to repeated bites, such as itching, welts, and secondary infections. So those are all symptoms. Not everyone reacts to the bites, and a person's reaction to bed bugs may change over time. Okay, and sometimes they don't have a reaction at first, but then they react after being bitten a number of times. And listed here are 5 of the categories of reaction. There are other pests that are confused with bed bugs. When a child comes to school with bites, bed bugs are not the only possibility. Scabies is a condition where mites burrow into the skin, resulting in lesions and open sores. This occurs on the hands, wrists, and elbows, but can be all over the body. Scabies must be diagnosed through microscopic examination of skin scrapings taken from the edge of the affected area. We get lots of calls from people who spend quite a bit of money treating for bed bugs when in fact they had scabies. Other pests sometimes are confused with bed bugs. Fleas can be present when domestic or even wild animals are living in or close to the home or room. Chiggers will cause extremely itchy or even painful bites. And if you look with a magnifying glass, these tiny parasites can be seen on the skin, similar to scabies. Bird mites will bite people, but do not burrow into the skin or live on people. They're found when birds nest in vents, windowsills, or air conditioning units and then walk on in. Rodent mites can also bite humans. There is a clear distinction between introduction versus infestation. It's important that you recognize the differences between these, especially this will help you to plan your next steps. An introduction is when a single or multiple bed bugs, such as males, nymphs, or non-pregnant females, hitchhike into your school. An infestation is a reproducing population, as is shown in the photo on your screen of bed bugs, eggs, and debris harboring on a ream of paper hidden in the back of a closet. Breeding infestations of bed bugs in a classroom will require professional treatment and quite possibly parental notification. Some states have laws that require notification of parents of any pest infestation. This couch in the corner of a classroom I visited was infested with bed bugs. It had been taken off the street and brought into the classroom to provide students with a special reading location. Upholstered furniture in a school, especially in neighborhoods with known bed bug issues, is not a good idea. Let's look for bed bugs in a school. When a call comes in that someone may have spotted a bed bug in a school, a pest professional needs to investigate to determine the extent of the incident in order to plan a site-specific course of action. When you look for bed bugs, make sure you have good lighting. Use a flashlight whose light beam can be seen even when the lights are on, preferably like a bright LED type of flashlight. You also need a magnifying glass, preferably 10 power or greater. A mirror for looking behind heavy furniture, like a bookcase. And a plastic zip-top bag for collecting specimens, an adhesive tape or a sticky lint roller to catch the bug, and then seal it in the bag. Observe student book bags and outer garments and clothes for signs. Here's an example. See how many bed bugs or eggs you can find. And you can see here the dots and see how many that you find. Well, there were at least 21 bed bugs, instars, and eggs in this part of the backpack alone. Schools are not ideal places for bed bugs, but they can subsist if not dealt with properly. School staff using break rooms may be the first to notice regular bites. Faculty lounges, office areas, or nurses' offices with upholstered furniture or cots may become infested. Similarly, schools with child care facilities or stationary bedding are prone to trouble, as are schools with dormitories. Backpacks, books, clothing, and even wheelchairs going from home to school provide bed bug harborage and transport on staff and students. See the bed bug hiding in the wheel? Wheelchairs should not be overlooked. What if we have areas for children to sleep during the day? Well, follow the basic cleanliness procedures. Vacuum floors daily. Mattresses and cots should be cleaned weekly, and personal items sent home or laundered in-house regularly, at least weekly. Walls and storage bins should be cleaned and inspected on a weekly basis. Safely store all blankets, bedding, clothing, and stuffed toys in individual plastic boxes with lids, as you see here. If a bed bug is found, check the surrounding area thoroughly for more bed bugs, and then arrange for an inspection by a professional. The classroom or other area where the bed bug was found should be carefully inspected by a trained pest management professional, and this includes desks, floors, walls, storage areas, and student belongings. Map out bed bug sightings and confirm findings, and inspect any closet or lockers used to store belongings, and make a note of all of these sightings. Clutter removal. Well, clutter is the bed bug's best friend. Unfortunately, some of the nation's finest school teachers have reputations for being pack rats. Quite often, classrooms are loaded with stacks of papers and teaching aids that have not been used for years. With bed bugs spreading across the nation, it's time to clean house. If clutter is a problem in some of your classrooms, during the next school break, make it a priority to reduce unused items, anything that is not moved in the last 2 years, and reduce that by at least half. Take into consideration that if an infestation of any pest does occur, all items may have to go anyway. So the best way to save the most precious items for the future is to eliminate potential bed bug harborages today. The EPA recommends that schools use Integrated Pest Management, or IPM, to reduce pests and unnecessary use of pesticides. Put simply, IPM is smart, sensible, and sustainable. A school IPM program uses common sense strategies to reduce sources of food, water, and shelter for pests in your school buildings and grounds. IPM is sustainable when implemented correctly, and it's usually a less costly option for effective pest management in a school. An IPM program takes advantage of all pest management strategies, including the judicious use of pesticides. The benefits of integrated pest management in schools are it's smart because it provides a healthier learning environment for children, and it's sensible because it addresses the root cause of pest problems. And it's sustainable because it provides better long-term control of pests. And there are savings in the long term. Correct implementation may reduce energy costs and may also reduce pest management costs. It's crucial to understand that bed bugs are not a sign of sanitary issues. They're after one thing, blood. You get bed bugs by exposure and coming into contact with the source of them. They are exposure pests. People who travel extensively are increasingly exposed to bed bugs as the global epidemic intensifies. Ideally, people would attach no social stigma to bed bugs. When a student is dealing with an infestation at home, it's very important to be sensitive to their problem. Unfortunately, the social stigma causes some parents to hesitate to admit to having bed bugs. Students are also likely to not want others to know that they have an infestation at home. Schools should work with the family of all students living in a bed bug infestation to develop strategies to prevent further spread. Limiting the number of items that have to be transported back and forth will reduce the chances of bed bugs brought into your school. Are there items that students could bring to school and leave there until the end of the school year? Are there school items such as books that students could take home and leave at home? Keep in mind that these items can be heat treated at the end of the year. Books and other critical items can also be placed in clear Ziploc bags to prevent them from picking up and transporting bed bugs. Avoid bringing in potentially infested items, such as furniture or other such donations. Backpacks, lunch boxes, and other items that travel back and forth to school can be inspected daily and sealed in a clear plastic container to prevent further bed bug spread. This is a great tip to give to parents to avoid spread back and forth from school. Keep in mind that a dryer set on high can be a quick fix, about 30 minutes, for clothing items and backpacks. For items that cannot be put in a dryer, a heat chamber may be used. However, the items could take several hours to get to lethal temperature. Another common bed bug myth is that pesticides alone will easily eliminate bed bug infestations. Proper use of pesticides may be one component of a general pest strategy, but it may not eliminate bed bugs alone. In addition, bed bugs have developed resistance to many pesticides. If you're dealing with a resistance population, that will not solve your problem. Although non-toxic options exist that are equally or more effective than pesticides, some people use pesticides because they believe them to be quicker and a cheaper way to eliminate the problem. But controlling bed bugs takes a multifaceted, integrated approach that the IPM provides. Dr. Kells will be discussing bed bug inspection and controls in just a moment. Who's responsible for reporting bed bug issues in your school? Well, everyone should be. Responding to a bed bug incident. What are the first things that you should do if you think you see a bed bug? Select all that apply. Okay, if bed bugs are found in a classroom or other location, do the following. Get a specimen if possible for professional identification. Any bugs found should be removed and collected. Keep the specimens as intact as possible. Use that Scotch tape or lint roller to capture the little buggers. And then call the facility manager or the school nurse, depending upon your school's bed bug action plan protocol, and inspect the immediate area. I'll conclude by noting that the EPA has developed an extensive bed bug resource. It has a plethora of best bed bug materials that you can easily download when needed. There is also a section on bed bugs in schools. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Anderson, for a very informative bed bug presentation. At this time, we'd like to turn it over to Dr. Kells. Dr. Kells, if you would, please.
Okay, thank you very much. My part of the presentation will be to discuss the idea of setting up a bed bug prevention and response plan for your school or for your school district. And I just want to open with this, excuse me. There we go. Okay, so I want to open up with this picture, this idea of what bed bugs are. And what you see on the picture is my face, yours truly, on the front of the St. Paul Pioneer Press. And after a rather exhaustive interview with the reporter and discussing what we were doing and everything that we were involved with, this was what the entire interview boiled down to, was basically yuck on the front page of the St. Paul Pioneer Press. And it kind of gives you an idea of what people see and what people feel when they're dealing with bed bugs. So I would like to go through a number of things, and the goals for this, and when we discuss the prevention and response plan, what we want to do for this part of the presentation is to help you understand the bed bug situation as it is today. And then secondly, we want you to be able to start preparing for developing a bed bug prevention and response plan so that you can adequately deal with bed bugs in a sort of an orderly and calm type of reasoned method. And this will really help to you to contend with bed bugs should they appear in your school. So first of all, let's just talk about the bed bug situation, not necessarily in the school itself or in the particular situations, because that has been dealt with quite thoroughly by Marcia. What I would like to do is talk to you about sort of the things that happen when we're dealing with bed bugs on a societal basis. And what we see is history repeating itself. I show you three pictures that of incidences where bed bugs have occurred, and these are actually before the 1960s. In 1900, we have a letter from the Minnesota Historical Society that talks about this young lady who was at a boarding school, and she was absolutely afraid, she writes in her diary, that her mother would find out that she was living with huge numbers of bed bugs, because she was afraid that she would be pulled out of school. And the panic that ensues is from her mother finding out that she's living with bed bugs would potentially deny her an education. I also showed two pictures, military pictures, 1851 and the 1940s. Bed bugs were intimately connected with these pictures in that bed bugs were seriously affecting troops. And what we find is that bed bugs take advantage of situations where people have their attention diverted. And in this case, in a military standpoint, people are less worried about bed bugs and more worried about conflict and the injuries that could ensue from that. And so what we're dealing with here is a pest that can take advantage when people are not fully attentive to their surrounds and to the fact that they could get bed bugs. And once it happens, then they can occur in large numbers. And certainly nowadays with conflict, and it doesn't necessarily have to be war conflict, but it could be economic conflict or people having their attention drawn to other things, bed bugs can certainly cause problems and take an opportunity in where they are. So after these historic pictures, of course, in the 1960s and thereabouts, they went away, and we are able to point to a number of possible reasons for this. The use of organochlorine insecticides followed by organophosphates and carbamates. But it wasn't just the insecticides themselves, but how it was used. And in these pictures you see quite liberal use of insecticide applications, and particularly in the spraying of the barracks. You'll note the method of treatment is to basically spray everything and anything that happens to be in the way. So with these long-lived residuals, bed bugs are wherever they're going to end up in contact with an insecticide, and that's going to cause effective control. Well, with IPM and other insects and increasing safety and reducing risks from insecticides, we certainly have changed our methods, and in the absence of bed bugs, we changed our methods to account for other insects. We learned their behavior, their biology. We were able to better focus our insecticides. We were able to develop better types of insecticides against those pests, and so we were able to deal with those quite effectively. Unfortunately, some of these treatments may not be perfectly matched to bed bugs, and so in part we are having to figure out what type of programs are effective against bed bugs that would allow for their prevention and control. So they're back, and should we necessarily be surprised? I don't think so. They are a systemic pest in society. I pushed this through in the 2006 to discuss this pest as a problem in our society and how they can easily move from the home to other areas, say the coffee shop, a theater, a restaurant, retail store. They could travel on buses and a variety of other areas. People pick them up in recycled furniture and bring them home. And that's just the simple single home. But when we look at society as a whole, we see a collection of homes and a collection of pathways that bed bugs can use to take advantage of and find areas where they can survive and thrive. And bed bugs have occurred, if we look on a societal basis, bed bugs have occurred in waves in North America. And in the 1999 and 2005, we were dealing with a lot of people not understanding or not believing that what bed bugs were. And so a lot of times we were dealing with them mainly in traveling hostels, in hotels, cities with airports, and in lower income areas, particularly with hotel beds that were discarded. And this is a particular issue that I personally found in the 2002 or so, when hotels were removing beds and moving them out to the back and then and leaving them for disposal. And people would drive behind the hotels, finding these mattresses, picking them up, and bringing them either to their homes or bringing them to a place where they could sell them. And I really believe that we had a massive influx of bed bugs during this time into lower income areas or in areas where we have resource and financially stressed people. Well, generally, society's response during this time was a lot of denial. We had a lot of stories come out about people, doctors in emergency wards who didn't believe that bed bugs. They said they were just a myth. We had emails flashing across the internet that talked about that bed bugs were just a ploy for people to get money to do studies on these insects. And then we also had hotels that didn't want to spend the money, and certainly people who were shocked at the amount of money that was required to adequately control this pest. So we had a lot of denial going on. 2005 to 2010, bed bugs continue in hotels, and they become mainstream in private multifamily residences, and then we get the secondary schools starting to report issues. So as bed bugs grew in number and they grew into more areas, they would start to show up in areas like schools and retail and that sort of thing. And so at this point, we have panic in the society, where people we're getting media who do a very effective job at spreading messages, but unfortunately they spread mainly that bed bugs were out to get people, and none of the other ways that bed bugs could be prevented from getting into these areas. 2010 to present, hotels and private residences are declining. We're seeing improvements to control and methods, but we're still seeing multifamily areas still struggling with bed bugs. And what we see is a need to accept that bed bugs are going to be around, accept how to control them, and certainly understand their response if they do show up in an area, as well as start accepting prevention measures to really cap the infestation and prevent their spread. In every single case I have dealt with, and I list a lot of different cases here, in every single case that you see on the screen here, whether it be schools, retail, senior centers, furniture delivery, home movers, social workers, EMS, fire departments, bed and breakfasts, medical transport, churches, and other places of worship, etc., etc., etc. Having a prevention and response plan is the difference between all-out panic for trying to deal with something. And these in the panic, you can see it quite often in things like news articles like failed attempt to fight bed bugs sparks devastating fire. Bed bugs result in fire hall renovation. School closed for cleaning after pesticide application. These are all examples of panic for people dealing with bed bugs. They are not accustomed to dealing with them. They are not monitoring for them. They are not taking preventive steps. And so when they do finally happen, there's shock and panic, and then there's a sort of an overkill response to try and deal with it. Well, what we need to do is we need to really look at prevention and response programs to deal with bed bugs. And so the idea is to, first of all, get the message out that don't panic, everything's under control. We can deal with this. We know that bed bugs are around. We know how to deal with them. We know how to prevent them. So here's our plan to deal with it. And to give you an example of how we did this, we got into a frame of mind at the University of Minnesota for getting ahead of these bed bug waves. And this is a map of all of the contacts that we get on our website, and I'll talk about the website in a couple minutes. But from the New York City reports, in 2009, we started to get an increase in complaints, and so we knew that we were going to continue to get these complaints, and certainly we needed to do something about it. And so the idea was to set up a response kit for prevention and response to bed bugs. And we'd offered a number of different things. For instance, the response kit, which includes things that you need for collecting and dealing with bed bugs that might show up. We have some guidelines. We have a sample letter that I'll talk about in a couple minutes, and then a variety of other things that we offer on the website. But at bedbugs.umn.edu, we found since 2009, actually 2012, that we've had about 47,000 page views for school information, and this represents about 37,000 unique people coming to this website. And this is of 1.4 million visitors in total for this time period. And so you can see that schools are a relatively minor issue right now compared to what other people are looking for, but it's still a pretty substantial number of people looking for information on schools. And the key thing here is the prevention and response. So, and what we do with this in this section is we basically say, hey, don't panic, everything's under control. We know that bed bugs can get into schools. Here's the tools that you need as an administrator or as a school nurse for dealing with it. We develop content mainly because of bed bugs, of course. Well, that's a no-brainer. But more importantly, we develop this content because there's a lot of uncertainty and unknown when bed bugs show up. Is this the only case? Are there other cases? Where did the bed bugs come from? Where could they possibly go to? With the lack of preparedness, we get panic occurring, which leads to overkill responses. And realistically, there's a sort of a spiraling effect that occurs, where this uncertainty and lack of preparedness leads to panic, leads to overkill. Excuse me. And so what we end up getting is we end up getting the message that you have to prepare for the eventuality. So with the bedbug prevention and response plan, Marcia went through and discussed some background related to schools. Next, Steve, number 2, will talk about discuss about putting the plan in action and how they've been successful. And what I would like to talk about are just the tips and tools and techniques that you can use to avoid some pitfalls that will typically occur when you're trying to deal with bed bugs in schools. So the first thing you need to do is you need to consider if your school is at risk. And there's some questions that you should ask to determine if your school is completely at risk or if you're just requiring a little bit of prevention. Some questions include, what are your current experiences with bed bug incursions? If considering a single school, what portion of the community could be considered low income? And then if you supervise a number of schools, then which of these schools will service largely low income neighborhoods? Now, I've said a few potentially inflammatory things here, but I really want to make the impress upon you that anyone can get bed bugs. It's not the economic situation, okay? It's not the clutter, although clutter helps bed bugs. It's not the clutter. It's not the dirtiness. We get a number of people talking about, they come into my office and they say, well, I have bed bugs, but I'm not a dirty person. Wrong assumption. Bed bugs like humans. Bed bugs like mammals, and so they're after places where people sleep or people rest for an extended period, and they will happily be there and they will happily feed. The difference between these two habitats that we're looking at is that there's an attention to problems and the resources that can be brought to correcting issues. In the rich home that you see in the upper left-hand corner, the person who lives in that type of residence is likely going to easily be able to afford the $5,000 or so that it might take if they had an extensive infestation in that house. And they're going to be sensitized to bed bugs being around, potentially because the people in that house travel, so that they're concerned about it. In the lower right-hand corner, though, the people living in that home might be just simply concerned about where their next meal is coming from, or how are they going to clothe their children or clothe themselves. And then proportionately, a bed bug control job of $200 that might effectively control bed bugs out of this type of house will be could be very problematic and could equate to half a month to a month of worth of food being put on the table. And so we have these disparities occurring, and we can see where the problems are going to occur. And if landlord's involved where the landlord is not necessarily compliant or with respect to effectively controlling infestations, we could end up with infestations in lower income just by chance of occurring because of the economic stresses that are in this situation. So that's one issue. The other issue is in multifamily housing, we have a number of people talking about the problem, but it tends to end up in a circular finger-pointing type of issue. Tenants might point to the property management or the landlord and say, hey, I need these bed bugs controlled. Property management might say, well, why am I paying for it? Because you're the one that brought the bed bugs in. Well, that's not necessarily true. And in some cases, in some areas, it might not be true that the property management would be legally required to take care of the bed bugs. We really have to look at what the property standards are and how they're written. So we get this finger pointing occurring between property management and the tenants. Then the property management might say, well, to pest control, well, you know what, I need you to give me something that will help me prepare or help me control bed bugs, and you're not being effective. And the pest control people might say, well, we're going to continually deal with this problem because, quite frankly, this is a low value account, and what you're paying me does not cover the extensive elbow grease, so to speak, that's required to deal with the bed bug problem itself. Remember, bed bug control is very, very labor intensive, which means it's going to be cost intensive. Pest control might also point their finger at tenants and say, well, you know what, they're not preparing for an effective control. And the tenants might point their finger back at the pest control saying, well, you never let us know when you're going to be in and how much preparation we have to do. And what we end up with is a continuing circle of finger pointing that's occurring between these three groups, and happily sitting in the middle of this are bed bugs, who love controversy and conflict, as you saw in the first couple of slides when we talked about the military and that sort of thing. Whenever we get disagreements and people not focusing in on the bed bug issue, then we get bed bugs that are very happily able to survive and thrive within the community. When responding to just complaints, now the other issue that we deal with is when we're just responding to complaints, you can see how bed bugs can thrive and survive, particularly in multifamily situations. Despite this circular blame that's going on, we can see that the response and how tenants perceive response and how landlords respond and how pest control people deal with bed bugs, you can see how they happily can thrive within a building. Here I show you a schematic of 6 apartments. This is a floor, single floor of an apartment building. It could be a low apartment building. It could be a bigger apartment building. It doesn't matter because the scenario is still going to be the same. And we have bed bugs in an apartment. And by chance, it's potentially that these bed bugs would not be detected by the people living there, or they might be detected, but people might not be willing to discuss it with their landlord for fear of any number of things happening. For instance, for fear that they're going to be blamed and evicted, for fear that they're going to have to pay for it, or for fear that they're going to have their attention brought to themselves by, say, by immigration services, and so they remain quiet about the issue. And so bed bugs are happily able in whatever scenario to survive and thrive, and they spread. And we've seen this with research out of Rutgers with Dr. Chang-Lu Wang and Dr. Richard Cooper, that bed bugs can easily spread. And so bed bugs show up in the lower left-hand apartment as well as the lower right-hand apartment. And it could be that by chance that the person living in that room will detect bed bugs feeding on them, and so they raise an alarm and they want something done about it. And so pest control come in and they're going to do something about it. They've talked to the landlord. But the people across the hall might also raise an alarm not necessarily because they were fed on by bed bugs, but because the person across the hallway complained about bed bugs. They could talk amongst each other. And so we end up getting pest control coming in, and they adequately, because it's a small infestation, they control the infestations, and everything is good. But guess what? You still leave the source population of bed bugs in the apartment. This has tremendous significance for school officials, particularly if you're dealing with bed bugs that are coming in on a regular basis. It's what the landlords are going to do, what tenants are going to do, that are really going to drive how many bed bugs show up in a school and what the school needs to do to respond to it. And we'll talk about this in a couple of other slides of how to deal with this and how to address it. Okay, so back to our bed bug scenario, bed bug problem. What happens, for instance, if, say, bed bugs are the people in that apartment finally realize that they have bed bugs and they start to complain? Pest control has given the landlords a certain price to deal with bed bugs. The price is below what is required to adequately control. So pest control come in and they control bed bugs in the bedroom area, of course. And we've seen a lot of this where bed bugs are controlled around the bed because they are bed bugs, they infest the bed. People don't understand that they can infest other places like the living room or into the hallway, that sort of thing. And so they control them in the bedroom. They don't do a full control, and bed bugs easily respond and come back into the area. We see this time and time again. And so we end up with an uncontrolled infestation that's allowed to control and spread. We have frustrated tenants, we have frustrated landlords, and essentially it just allows for the bed bugs to survive and thrive. And so if we were to take this simple schematic and put it back to our societal area, the more homes that are infested, the more chances the bed bugs are going to use these opportunities to find their way into schools as they normally spread. And so when we start talking about bed bugs, this is the societal pest. This is the issue that we have to deal with. And so any school that is servicing, and essentially that's every single school, should have a prevention and response plan. And certainly, if you are servicing areas that are having problems getting rid of bed bugs within the community, you definitely need to have a very effective prevention and response program. Okay, so we've discussed the risk. Now, what do we do about that risk? Well, I'm just going to give you two scenarios, and they're high infestation and low infestation. And it's potentially that schools are going to be on a continuum, either between the low infestation or negligible risk, all the way to the high infestation, where you're regularly going to see bed bugs coming in. And so you really have to match your response in your prevention and response program to the risk that you're going to have bed bugs show up. And for instance, with high risk, you might need more control tactics, and we'll talk about control tactics in a second. But to give you an example, a school that supports homeless kids with a drop-in center for resting, and bed bugs are easily able to be transferred from the homeless shelter via the kids, via their clothes and backpacks into the school and into other areas. So in that sort of situation, you might require some different scenarios for dealing with bed bugs. We might require, for instance, and we'll talk about in a second again, but we might require an industrial dryer to treat clothes and backpacks as they come into the school, to heat treat them so that they're not building up a level of backpacks. They're not developing a level of infestation that could transmit from their backpacks to the school. In a low-risk situation, if you had periodic introductions, say, you might have one or two a year or something like that, you might just consider something as simple as an inspection and cleaning protocol. And so, you might have a case where the bed bugs just show up. There might be one residents that might have bed bugs in one area, and they might show up on a regular basis. And if you have to deal with them, then you know, it just might be a simple matter of cleaning. The low risk situation that you might look at, you know, in your bed bug response kit, of course, and we'll talk about the response kit part, but you know, periodic inspections, maybe having a dog, certified dog come through to do inspections. Keep records to determine frequency. Where are they showing up? Are they showing up in one particular class or a couple of particular classes that you can focus on? Monitors, they use the monitors, sticky traps, and that sort of thing. I don't, in schools, I don't hold a lot of hope for them because there's a big potential for false negatives to occur. That is, you get bed bugs in a room, but they're not necessarily blundering into traps. Okay, so the idea that that you're going to get false negatives is real with any type of monitoring. So this is something that you have to consider. Targeted vacuuming. While people are vacuuming in areas, bringing out a crack and crevice tool for that vacuum and quickly doing around crack and crevice areas, which I'll show you in a second where the priority areas are, would certainly help the situation if you have a periodic introduction in a low-risk situation. In a high-risk situation, you want to allow for the low-risk practices that you would normally do, but you also want to look at using a commercial dryer potentially for infested articles. You might use more regular vacuuming, and you might even consider crack and crevice residual insecticide treatments in areas where bed bugs may collect. But we really want to have justification that yes, this is necessary. You may also use a dust insecticide in hidden voids to prevent any buildup of bed bugs. And so these are options that you might consider if you're continually getting bed bugs showing up with a risk of an infestation starting. So when we're in an area with general seating and wooden tables and that sort of thing, we might use vacuuming, we might use inspections. We certainly could use canines in this area if it was a higher risk area or if we wanted to determine what type of risk we were dealing with. But in general, there's not a lot of places where bed bugs are going to harbor in this area, and if they do, it's going to be a simple introduction, and they might look at transferring over to other areas. Versus this type of area where we're going to have a lot of shoes, we're going to have outdoor jackets, things that can be near kids' beds and in apartments. This is the type of stuff that is going to allow for bed bugs to more easily transfer, particularly if we have backpacks that are being put on beds for students while they're doing or beside beds when students are doing their homework and that sort of thing. And also note, you know, when we talk about clutter, here's a perfect example of where we have some clutter developing on the top of these shelves. So we have what I would consider a high risk if we were to get a number of apartments having bed bugs. So bed bugs would easily be able to start transferring over to other areas within this specific area, and this could become a higher risk area for bed bugs collecting. Keep in mind that it's not just those areas, but also areas where we're going to get people resting and things like that. Some research done in our lab showed that bed bugs can orient to and be attracted to areas where humans might leave their odor, particularly if they're going to deposit sweat or any sort of materials off their body. When we want bed bugs to feed effectively, we do use an artificial system, and we will actually rub the membrane on our arms to stimulate bed bugs to feed. And we've seen in our research that bed bugs will identify areas that have sweat deposited on them versus other areas. So bed bugs, once they start collecting up in the shoe area and the coat and where the backpacks are stored, can easily start to move and spread to where kids might sit or lie or find or rest in areas. So this brings us to the third point. You know, in it, now that we know the risk level, now that we have some ideas of what we need to do about that risk, now we need to prepare our staff and our nursing staff, facility personnel, teachers about what we're going to do about bed bugs. And really, I strongly recommend the use of having a bed bug collection kit, but also having someone who's willing to use it. It's one thing to have the kit around, but if no one's willing to use it, then it becomes a problem. Bed bugs are not magical creatures. They do not fly, they do not jump, they do not magically appear from one area to another area. They simply walk, or they can be carried. And so approaching a bed bug in an area is very simple. As long as you're not brushing up against items and articles, then it's very low risk that you're going to ever pick up a bed bug. And using some tape, which we'll show you in a second, using some tape and some other methods, you can certainly capture and collect bed bugs for the identification that you need. So making sure that you have people that understand this and are willing to use the kit is very important. So the bed bug collection kit. Plastic box with a lid to contain stuff. Bed bugs, human bed bugs do not crawl on smooth surfaces very easily, and so things can be easily contained in a plastic box. Plastic shipping tape can easily collect up bed bugs. Sandwich bags, after you finish folding the tape, you can put the tape into a sandwich bag. Having a notebook to collect any information that you need to communicate to the pest control and to the facility administrator. Having a flashlight and having exam gloves are just some of the simple things that you require when you're dealing with bed bugs. Using a vacuum and knowing how the vacuum should be used is important, as well as the keeping of notes of where bed bugs are found, not only within the classroom, but which classrooms are having a problem. You may have to inspect student backpacks at times when they're elsewhere in the school to see if there's bed bugs in the area that you should be aware of. And if you can isolate and locate that one backpack or so in a low-risk situation, then you might be able to quietly deal with it and prevent it from occurring in further issues. So after your people are prepared, then we need to create a letter, or you should have a letter that you could use for your practices when you're communicating with students. We have a letter online, and it deals with a lot of different language. I think the Minnesota Independent School District 12, the principal at the middle school, as well as the nursing staff, helped to produce this letter, and we provide sort of very simplified letter that people can use on their own letterhead to address bed bugs outside of the school. And we use a number of different things. We try and keep it as simplistic as possible, but also we try and push people that if they're having problems, bring them to the school, because in the next couple of slides I'll talk about how you might have to deal with this from a public health standpoint. So with the letter, again, you may have to deal with kids' belongings. Separating home stuff from school stuff might be important. If you're having a chronic situation, you may have to have some textbooks at home and shoes as well as at home, and then another set of shoes and textbooks at the school. You may have to use freezing or heat treatment for popular library books. And from a public health standpoint, you might have to help families in looking for assistance to dealing with this. And there can be a number of problems that can occur when families are trying to obtain help. But it could be something as simple as if you're having an issue at the school and you've identified a multifamily residence that is contributing to the problem, it might be less of focusing on the families and more of focusing on the landlord to do something about it. And this would require potentially public health or housing inspection to help you out with that. Okay, so my last couple minutes here, I want to talk about some of the things that you can also use to deal with controlling bed bugs in the schools. I'm going to go very quickly through this, so any videos, written materials, anything that I'm going to talk about here, you can find at bedbugs.umn.edu. And so we talked briefly about steam, dry heat, freezing, physical removal, and insecticides. So let's get started with steam. Steam is very effective when dealing with bed bugs. Although it does take time, it does have labor, there is potential for objects to become for damage, but it can be avoided in most cases. Just try it on unseen areas. It might require retreatment because steam is only a temporary surface kill. Once the steam is gone, bed bugs could potentially reinfest that area if there's no residual effects. I think the biggest thing that you need to think about is when you're using steam, you need to use a steam generator, and that yellow device that I have in my hand is actually a non-contact thermometer. So while you're steaming, the optimal steaming temperatures are between 160 and 180 degrees Fahrenheit. Below that, bed bugs are likely to survive. Above that range, then you might cause damage to surfaces. So you really want to keep within that area. And if you're below 160 degrees Fahrenheit when you're steaming, you're going too fast. If you're above 180, you're going too slow. So this is probably the best example that I can show you of steaming. If you want more information on how to steam, we have a video at our site. Laundering, again, very effective, and although it might require a little bit of planning. Dry items in a medium to high heat for at least 30 minutes. The temperature here is going to be about 120 degrees Fahrenheit for that time, and it all comes down to exposure time. With steam, you've got an incredibly short exposure time, a very fast cool down, and so you have to have that higher temperature. With dryers and with other heat treatment, you need to have about 122 degrees Fahrenheit, and in this case, heating items in a dryer for about at least 30 minutes will hit those conditions quite nicely. There's methods for commercially delivering heat, and it could be using gas devices or electric devices, and these are items that are going to be supplied probably by contracted pest control, although you could yourself, if you needed to, talk to some of the companies that are supplying these heaters specifically for control of bed bugs. And I express that emphatically, that you really need to look for the companies that supply these devices for control of bed bugs, because they also have the training and the knowledge about controlling bed bugs and some of the problems that you're going to be seeing, and you're certainly going to reduce your chances of damage if you go that way. Whole room heat treatments are very effective in buildings and in residences. The nice thing about it is that you don't have to worry about treating things with insecticide or having to handle things in the laundry. Everything stays in the room as long as it won't be damaged, obviously, by the heat, and you can control bed bugs quite effectively. Freezing, very effective, but know what you can and cannot freeze. We talk about freezing lower than 0 degrees Fahrenheit for at least 3 days. You want to make sure you have a remote thermometer and to monitor the temperature of the items. When we're talking to residents in buildings and that sort of thing, we actually say 0 degrees for 4 days so that we add a level of safety margin to make sure that things would actually be controlled. But from a commercial standpoint, where you're going to do monitoring, 0 degrees for Fahrenheit for 3 days is the effective lethal conditions. Do not place anything outside in the cold. First of all, based on our climate this year, we're not going to have very many cold periods, but cold is a very complex method of controlling for bed bugs, and if you're not going to use a standard freezer, then you're not likely to get control of bed bugs if you put things outside. Vacuuming, again, excellent for reducing the number of bed bugs, although you might not get all of them. Utilize a crack and crevice tool. This is something that I've used a number of times when I've helped to control bed bugs. That's yours truly, proving that, yes, professors do work from time to time. When you're vacuuming, think about the crevices and baseboards, electronic items, furniture. All these things can concentrate bed bugs, and these are areas where vacuums can be very effective. When you're finished vacuuming, bed bugs can survive the trip down a hose into a vacuum, so make sure you're taking the bag out, putting it into a plastic bag for disposal outside. Killing bugs by hand, I tell you, there's a lot of bed bugs that can be controlled by hand if you can find them and if you can get a hold of them. So, capturing and squashing bed bugs are very effective. Use gloves, a washcloth, paper towel, or sticky tape, and you can easily control bed bugs. Some tools that you might use, a flashlight, of course. A credit card or thin plastic card is very easy, allows for you to dig into areas where bed bugs might be. Have plastic bags, and then hot soapy water is effective for killing bed bugs, but it's more for physical removal of bed bugs than it is for, say, drowning them or cleaning an area that's going to prevent them from coming back into that area. Using hot soapy water and a cloth is more about controlling by removal than it is by affecting the population. So insecticides, again, when we get into high-risk situations, it might be justifiable, but some notes that I want to pass on to you in high-risk situations: use the material as per label. All insecticides have labels, and they tell you where they can and cannot be used, and they have instructions to make sure that you're using it with the least risk possible. Also, no fogging. The only time I've seen fogging against bed bugs work is when they're dripping off the ceiling and you've got such a large infestation, you can directly hit them with the fog. Other than that, fogging is useless against bed bugs. And even if you were to fog against bed bugs, you still got to go back through and use all of the regular areas, all of the regular practices to get rid of the infestation completely. No over-the-counter insecticides. Most insecticides have active ingredients that bed bugs are resistant to. So don't go to the local hardware store and pick up an insecticide can and think you're going to be able to control bed bugs. It just does not work. I really think short-acting insecticides have limited use in this case. We do recommend short-acting insecticides in residences, particularly when they're having to do control, but I really think that they have limited use in schools. What we really need to use is a residual crack and crevice application, potentially maybe a spot application, but mostly crack and crevice, and then dust might be used in voids. So an insecticidal dust can be used in voids according to label. Please keep in mind that we want to add that extra layer of security for students. So we want to place these materials where students will not contact the insecticide, and then we also want to apply this after hours to allow a very large margin of safety for the application. A lot of times the standard, a lot of the labels have, once the residues are dry, then say an apartment can be released. Industry practices to typically allow for 5 to 6 hours, and maybe up to 24 hours, depending on the company, to before people are allowed back into that area. So, realistically, with a school, if you're applying on the weekend or if you're applying after hours, that provides you with that level of low riskness, if I can use that term. So always apply where students cannot contact, and also where you're going to be able to have this material dry and provide that level of safety. Now, I've gone through this very quickly. There's more, as I mentioned, there's more information and videos at bedbugs.umn.edu. We also have support for property owners, managers, homeowners and tenants, students, if you're dealing with boarding schools and that sort of thing. And so please feel free to use this resource to provide that, and we do have a number of videos actually in different languages if you're having to deal with languages other than English. We have about 6 or 7 different languages in videos that you can use. So I'll leave it at that, and I know there'll be questions posted for this webinar, and if there's any other questions, please feel free to contact us at our website, bedbugs.umn.edu, or else with our email, bedbugs@umn.edu. We're also on Facebook and Twitter as well, and I thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Kells, for a lot of very good bed bug information. And it really sounds like we need to develop and have a bed bug action plan ready to go. For our final presenter, we'd like to turn it over to Mr. Molino. Mr. Molino, please take it away.
Thank you very much. Very informative information here from Dr. Kells and Dr. Anderson. And I just want to supplement that with the fact that I want to drive home the need for a bed bug plan in your school. It's critical that you have a plan and that you work your plan, because my experience tells me that without a plan in place, people panic. There's lots of anxiety, and you'll get these panic calls from a principal or a nurse in a particular school, and they'll say, you know, I found a bed bug, you need to come over here and exterminate the entire school, or, you know, I saw on TV where they cover a house with plastic and fumigate it, we need to do that here in my school, etc. All of these things have been panic phone calls to me in the past, because people tend to be afraid of the unknown, and bed bugs are fairly new to today's occupants of school buildings. In the past, yeah, we had issues in the past that people have long forgotten about. So with the reintroduction and resurgence of bed bugs in the school environment, it's critical that you have a plan and that you work your plan. So again, the reason for the plan is that, you know, you have to drive home the point that bed bugs don't transmit diseases. You have to let people know that bed bugs are not a sign of being unclean, and that it's not from a dirty home environment that bed bugs are originating, because people really don't want to admit that they have a bed bug problem in their home because of the fear that someone's going to criticize them for having a dirty home. A child from a bed bug infested home should certainly not be sent home from school. So your plan's got to educate all the stakeholders within your school community, so they all understand what bed bugs are all about and how you're going to go about treating bed bugs in your particular circumstance. So if someone is suspected, a child is suspected of carrying bed bugs in the school, and I think Dr. Kells illustrated the fact that it's not only students that may be bringing bed bugs into the school. It could be staff. I've had that situation also, where staff members have been observed with bed bugs, and you need to be able to treat everyone with discretion and diplomacy, and you have to consider the sensitivity of the issue, and this is not something that you know, you need rumors going around the building about who has bed bugs and where they came from and why they have them, etc. So you need a plan in place to educate your staff on what to look for. Certainly that certain staff members are going to be in a position to observe insects in the classroom environment much quicker than someone else. So especially the teacher, the pedagogical staff needs to be educated on what to look for, what are the signs and symptoms of bed bug associated hitchhikers in your classrooms. So part of the basic plan is, again, this has been already stated by Dr. Kells, you need a bed bug kit so you can identify what is a bed bug. A lot of times we'll get a call that we have a bed bug in the school, or we saw a bunch of bed bugs, and you'll go and investigate and bring in the IPM vendor that we utilize, or one of my staff who's been trained will go out and they'll take a look, and it's not a bed bug at all. So there's lots of fear of the unknown, and as soon as you start talking about bed bugs, every bug becomes a bed bug that someone observes in a classroom, and they panic and they call. So you need to have a kit available so that people, and again, Dr. Kells alluded to the fact that you need someone who's going to use that kit. Very similar to, you know, when I worked in the hospital field and AIDS became an issue, we had nurses and staff who wouldn't even go into a room with an AIDS patient. You have the same sort of things occur with a bed bug. People are so terrified that, you know, they're going to jump on them and fly into their hair and then get in on their clothing, and they're going to take them home. And so there's a lot of panic and fear, and that's where education comes in. You need to really educate folks on what a bed bug can and cannot do in a school environment. So that's critical to this. If you suspect someone's carrying a bed bug, again, you need to have that bed bug identified. That's the first step, is critical to identify, is it in fact a bed bug? Here in New Jersey, we have certified educational facilities managers. Most of them have been trained in what to look for with bed bugs. There's a designated person under the IPM law here in New Jersey required in every school. Take advantage of the training offered to these folks and call upon them. And certainly you need a vendor available at your beck and call to come in fairly quickly and address the problem. You don't want to tell somebody that, you know, we saw a bed bug and next week the vendor's going to come in. You need a vendor that's going to be on call and sensitive to the needs of a school environment, which is much different than, you know, someone calling at home and saying, I saw a bed bug, and they may get there in a day or two to observe it. In a school environment where you have hundreds of children involved and you have a lot of staff involved, you really want to address that problem head on real quick. Here's an action flow chart on some of the things you can do if a suspected bed bug has been cited. You attempt to collect the specimen, and then you go through the routine. Is it on a student, or is it just in the classroom? And there are various things you can do in both scenarios. I won't read all this to you, but this information is readily available, and you should incorporate this into your plan so that everyone knows what you're going to do. Bear in mind, you are not going to send the student home from school because a bed bug was observed in the classroom and even suspected on an individual student. So you need to make sure that you label this bed bug specimen and where did it come from. It's sometimes easier to identify the source if you know exactly where in the room the bed bug was observed, under what circumstances was it observed, and by all means, again, try and collect it. We've been educated here today on what to look for, what the eggs look for, and what the bugs themselves look like, but again, you're no expert, so you need to call in the experts, and you need training in advance so that people know what they're looking for and what the signs and symptoms are and what the plan is to take action in the event that that does occur in your school. Monitors, sometimes we use monitors, although I agree with Dr. Kells, they're not very effective in certain situations, but they are something that allies fear that something is being done. If people don't see action being taken, if you find one bed bug in a room, which in most cases, the experience I have is we found one or two bed bugs in a room, and then we monitor from that point on, and we observe and we educate the teacher and the nurse, and everyone is aware that a bed bug made an appearance. There was a introduction into a classroom. There's no active infestation, but you need to be aware that, you know, a child is coming in from home. They may have a problem at home, especially in a multifamily dwelling incidents. Here in New Jersey, there's actually legislation that's been passed by the state Senate that requires the landlord to treat bed bug issue within a multifamily environment. Also, in a multifamily environment here in New Jersey, the Board of Health will get involved. So you can call upon these professionals to assist you in addressing the problem in the student's home. Again, education is key to this, including the parents. And if you have to meet with the PTA or the PTO and go through what a bed bug situation is and how you're addressing it, you sometimes need professional assistance in allaying fears, because you often get people saying, well, what do you know about bed bugs? So bring in the professionals whenever you can to assist. In this particular slide, there's a dog up in the right-hand corner. There's a commercial that airs in the tri-state area here, Roscoe, the bed bug sniffing dog. I've had cases where I brought in a dog, not Roscoe, but we did bring in a dog into our central office situation at one point to sniff out the premises, because there were one bed bug was observed, and again, in an office environment, everyone starts to email everybody and starts the ball rolling that the whole place is creeping and crawling with bed bugs. So you need to address that to allay panic and fear and keep everyone calm. So the more things you can do to have people see that you're actively addressing the problem and you're concerned about the problem, the better off you'll be, and the quicker you'll allay all the fear and all those rumors. The bed bug sniffing dog was extremely effective. He actually sniffed out in a 150,000 square foot office complex. He sniffed out 4 locations where when we inspected further, sure enough, there was a bed bug. So the dog is well trained in that environment. In New Jersey, under state law, the principal is in charge of the IPM program in the school. Your state may be different, so you need to check laws and see who's involved and what the law requires. Here, we have certified educational facility managers that have been trained and understand some of their role in dealing with IPM and in dealing with some sort of an infestation or an introduction of bed bugs into the school environment. And you should, in your plan, have a list, a checklist of what each individual is going to do, who's going to call who's going to coordinate this effort, and how your plan is going to work to be successful in addressing a bed bug introduction into your school. And if everyone's aware of what's going on, you can really nip this in the bud quite quickly and prevent the infestation. If people just aren't observant or don't know what to look for, this can quickly get away from you. So call upon your IPM vendor. You need to have a special license in New Jersey under state law to address IPM in schools. There's an IPM classification under the Pesticide Licensing Act, and it requires only licensed personnel licensed in school IPM address any issues within a school. So you want to make that very clear to your staff and folks within the school community, the facility folks, etc., so that they don't think they're going to go around and indiscriminately spray pesticides all over the building and cause more problems. So call upon your IPM professional to come in and make sure you're inspecting areas within a classroom. If an insect has been identified as a bed bug in that classroom, you really need to do a thorough inspection and keep a constant vigilance on looking for those insects. And again, in a school environment, be aware that, you know, a child that has an insect brought in from home in a particular classroom may have siblings within the school or within a neighboring school. You know, if the child has 3 or 4 brothers or sisters and they're all going to school from the same home, you need to start looking in those classrooms to identify if there may be an issue there that someone hasn't noticed yet, or just to keep an eye on it to make sure that you're one step ahead of this. So bear in mind that that may be the issue you're dealing with, is multiple children from a particular home environment. Dr. Kells alluded to the multifamily dwelling and how they move around within that dwelling, and if, you know, one tenant recognizes it but the other one is in denial, you can have a problem that lasts and lingers for quite a while. So you're going to have to monitor this within that environment. I can't overstress the fact that bringing in furniture, you know, a lot of times we find furniture in a school and you say, where did this come from? And, you know, someone decided they saw someone discarding a couch or an overstuffed chair, and they say, you know, that'd be nice to have in the teacher's lounge, or that'd be nice to have in the sitting area, or maybe in the library, media center, etc. So they bring it in. They think they're doing a wonderful thing. With that, you may be bringing in a problem. So we don't allow any of those types of things to take place. And periodically, you'll find, you know, a particular piece of furniture that no one knows where it came from, and you look at the condition of it, remove it. Believe me, get it out of your school environment. It's not where you want it. The first thing you must do, again, is the inspection. You have to search the area, look around, look for evidence, check in out-of-the-way places, cracks, crevices, etc., and look at all of that stuff. Vacuuming is critical in this environment. And again, sometimes vacuuming is just another step to show people you're taking a proactive approach to the problem. You recognize the problem. Lots of people want to know, why aren't we just spraying insecticide all over the school? And we all know that's not the way you address this type of a problem. Stress to parents, especially if you meet with the PTO or the PTA, that laundering or putting backpacks into the dryer occasionally on high heat, as been said here before, is one of their best methods to prevent a hitchhiker from getting into the home from the school environment, if that in fact is happening. And if you have a case where you have an insect problem in a particular classroom, you again want to use plastic containers, tight closing lids on containers, Ziploc type bags, etc., to contain students' book bags and clothing, etc. In your school, you should have someone designated to monitor the Integrated Pest Management program. There should be a logbook, and you should make sure that that logbook includes the date, what was cited, a particular insect or suspected insect was cited, where it was cited, who's reporting the problem, who exactly cited this, and that way your pest professional can talk to the individual that says they saw an insect that was a bed bug and where that bed bug originated from, especially if you didn't get a sample of that bug, if it wasn't captured. You want to make sure that your management team or your IPM vendor has an outline of what are they going to do, what's their corrective action plan when it comes to a situation like this, and that should be discussed with the school and the nurse and the IPM designated person and your facility staff long before you run into a problem. And make sure you have the right vendor on board. If you're using an outside IPM vendor, One of the things they may have to do, and I've seen this over and over and called upon them over and over, time and time again, is to meet with families and parents and PTOs and PTAs and principal groups and staffs of nurses and various pedagogical people and talk to them about what the problem is, how to identify the problem, what to look for, and what some of the solutions are that they will implement. And they will stress that they're not going to just come in and indiscriminately spray pesticides all over the building. That's not what pest management is all about today, and that's not the effective way to do this. And there are laws that preclude a pest control vendor from doing that. So in New Jersey, you're required to have 72 hours notification prior to applying any insecticide in the school unless it's an absolute emergency, which is considered a stinging insect. Bed bugs under state law here are not considered an emergency, and you must go through the 72-hour notification if you're going to do an actual treatment. Again, tight closing lids and ways to contain student artifacts and separate them is important if you have a recurring problem in a particular classroom until that problem is resolved from the home environment. So if you have multiple insects discovered, your plan should include what you're going to do about it and how you're going to isolate things and how you're going to get training material out to the students, the public, the staff on what the problem is and how to address the problem. And again, you do this discreetly. It's not something that you need to broadcast that you know, a particular classroom has a problem. If the bed bug is found on a student or a student's clothing or their book bag or their coat, certainly you want to monitor the situation, but you should never send that child home. That is not how you effectively treat this condition, and that's not what you want to purvey out in the public, that that's what someone's going to be ostracized and set aside. That's the last thing you want to do in the school environment. So the utmost discretion is required when you're dealing with this. Parents of students where a bed bug was found should have some educational material sent home. The parent certainly should be approached if the problem is observed on a particular student and made aware that there may be a problem that they should look at home. A lot of times your pest control IPM vendor, at least in the cases I've been involved with some of the better firms, will actually assist you in dealing with the home environment. They'll do a free inspection for the parent to go to the home and actually point out if there is a problem and what to look for and methods of treatment that may be available. Certainly they're not going to treat for free, but they would certainly identify the problem and assist the parent in some way. So you should look for a company that will work with you in that regard and get that information out to the parents to assist them. Again, this is an area that a lot of people are unfamiliar with. It's been, you know, a long time since bed bugs have been reintroduced into the home environment and the workplace and the school, so people aren't aware of what to do. So you need to educate them. That's critical. And I want to leave you with the fact that your plan should stress, and you need to educate to your staff that they can't bring pesticides in from the local hardware store or from home and just indiscriminately spray in the school building. It's a no-no under IPM laws in here in New Jersey. There are serious consequences to that. You don't want to have that happening in your school, and you need to stress that you must have a special license in all cases to apply any pesticide within the school environment. So let's leave that treatment up to the IPM professional. Reach out to your health department for assistance. Certainly Dr. Kells has a wealth of information. Dr. Anderson has a wealth of information on the EPA website, and you should avail yourself of all of that information, put your plan together, and educate your staff on what the plan is all about and how it's going to be implemented if a problem should occur. And that's what I have to offer today, and I thank you very much for your attention and attending this webinar.
Well, thank you, Mr. Molino, for your presentation and for ideas on how to use a bed bug action plan. At this time, I have a few announcements. First, I would like to show you a list of all of our upcoming school IPM webinars. All are held at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, so save the dates. For this list and more information, please visit our website. New to our webinar series this year is the ability for you to download a certificate of attendance. For some of you, these certificates will provide supportive documentation for continued education credits. You will be sent a link a few hours after the webinar to print your own certificate. The School IPM Listserv is our newest way to assist and motivate those in the school community to start, grow, and sustain their IPM programs. By subscribing, you'll receive invitations to upcoming webinars, highlights from and links to IPM-related newsletters, updates on EPA school IPM activities, along with other pertinent announcements. To sign up for our listserv, go to our website, or you can email us at school.ipm@epa.gov. Thank you again to our great presenters, Dr. Stephen Kells, Dr. Marsha Anderson, and Mr. Stephen Molino, and to each and every one of you, our audience, for participating in this webinar. A list of all questions and answers will be provided on our website, along with a set of resource links. Thank you for your attendance today at this webinar presentation.